I think we can start now, if that's all right. So, hello everyone, welcome to our Decoding Recent Cultivated Meat Regulatory Progress in APAC webinar. My name is Ankur Chaudhary and I'm the Policy Specialist for APAC at the Good Food Institute Asia Pacific, otherwise also known as GFI APAC. Before we get started, I have a few things to share. First of all, for those of you who are new to the work of the Good Food Institute, we are an international nonprofit organization that is developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. To do that, we have identified the most effective solutions. We mobilize resources and talent, and we mobilize partners across the food system to make alt proteins accessible, affordable, and most importantly, delicious. Secondly, this webinar would be recorded. We'll post a recording on our YouTube channel and we will email a recording of the webinar within the next few days to everyone. So if you missed a part of it or didn't catch something, no worries, we'll send it to you so you can revisit it later on. The agenda for today is actually quite simple. I'll start first with like a very short introduction, and then I'll go to each of my panelists and have three really brilliant, amazing panelists who'll give quick updates on the regulatory developments, what it means for the region, what are the implications of it on the industry, and what regulatory developments they foresee in the coming future. So we'll start with the panel discussion. I would definitely allow everyone like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the time to ask questions and answers. I would also encourage you that you can actually type out your question and answer in the box, like the chat box, which is there, which helps us to keep a track of them very easily. And I can pop in those questions whenever I feel like or whenever it's needed to our panelists. So we have three panelists today. We have Yeonjoo, Chief Strategy Officer for TissenBioFarm. We have Nurul Hidayah Abubakar, who's the Assistant Director for Halal Certification with MUIS. And we have Victoria Taylor, Head of Sector Building and Advocacy at Cellular Agriculture Australia. As we all know, there has been a significant progress in the past 3-4 months in APAC. Like within the first 4 months of 2024, the MFDS, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety of Republic of Korea, started accepting applications for cultivated meat products. You have cultivated quail entering the final stages of regulatory review with fazans and also getting regulatory approval in Singapore. And then you have the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, which is MUIS, announcing that cultivated meat could be considered halal under certain circumstances. So there has been like a great amount of progress within this particular sector, and we do see a great and a brighter future. With that, I would start with welcoming Yeonjoo and invite like her opening comments around like what does she think, or like what with MFDS accepting applications for regulatory evaluation of cultivated meat. What do you see as the impact on cultivated meat industry in South Korea, but also how do you see it gaming it out in the APAC region?
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction, Anchor. And hello, everyone. I'm Yeonjoo from TissenBioFarm. I'm in charge of business development and strategy. To answer Anchor's question, I believe the regulatory development that happened in February just 2 months ago is very pivotal in that it laid the legal foundation for the cultivated meat industry in South Korea. Before that amendment, companies actually could submit applications for the approval of temporary standards and specification for food, etc. But the ministry was not able to review applications because they didn't have internal standards for evaluation. But now they can start reviewing applications officially because they have specific guidelines. For the cultivated meat industry, this means that the regulatory risks have been largely addressed. Now, the industry players have a clearer picture about what data and information to prepare and how long it will take for the review. It allows companies to be better prepared in terms of business planning and communicating with current and future investors. So, it's a good news for those trying to raise funds from venture capital as well. Also, since South Korean standards are relatively stricter compared to other regions, It means that once you get an approval in South Korea, it may become easier to get approvals in other parts of the world. In terms of what it means for APAC as a region, I think it's an important milestone because South Korea may be the third government to approve cultivated meat after Singapore and New Zealand, Australia. When these four national markets are open for cultivated meat, the APEC region will become very significant in the cultivated meat industry because all these countries are high income nations, which means bigger market potential.
No, sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Now I think I should definitely go to Victoria to start with. Like my question to you, I think before we started the webinar, like we discussed it, but I'll pose it to you again. How do you see this application for culture quail evolving in Australia, and at the same point in time, the big win which WOW had in Singapore? Like, how do you see that? And how do you see it evolving in Australia, but at the same point in time, the impact which it would have on the Singaporean ecosystem or the APAC ecosystem?
Thanks, Ankur, and hi, everybody. Can I start by saying I'm heartsick to see an Australian company receive approval in Singapore before they receive approval in Australia. But that's obviously outweighed by the excitement that VOW is now selling their cultured quail in Singapore, and within a few hours, diners at the Mandela Club will sit down to enjoy that product in Singapore. So that's super exciting. I think VOW may be one of the only or the only company selling cultivated meat in market at the moment. So that's a great win for Australia. Obviously, Australia, New Zealand, through our Food Standards Authority or for SANS, is accepting applications for cellular agriculture or cultivated meat. The cultured quail, Vals cultured quail, has been under assessment in Australia since the beginning of last year. So the applications went in to Australia and Singapore at around the same time. Our process is taking longer. We have had the assessment, the hazard and risk assessment, came out in December last year, at which for SANS found no food safety concerns. That has to go to consultation, which has closed, and we're expecting a second round of consultation to open imminently, and hopefully a decision to approve cultured quail in Australia, New Zealand by the end of the year. So that's a 2-year process in Australia, New Zealand. What does it mean for APAC? I think we're obviously excited to see our regulators upskilling themselves, really. I think, 2 years is a long time, but we have to accept this was the first application in Australia, and you have had other applications in Singapore before. And our regulators have been working hard to upskill themselves on the technologies and the processes. So I think, will this lead to a rush of applications to Australia? We can talk a little bit later probably about the hurdles in our system. I think it's important to remember that VOW's product is quite unique. It is a cultured quail. It is not what we're seeing in the Northern Hemisphere around chicken and or beef. And so you cannot necessarily just assume that because VOW's product has been approved that it will be a simple and fast process for future applications. But we're obviously, based on media reports, we're in the right region for cultivated meat to be an economic opportunity and option for consumers going forward.
Sure, absolutely. And that's actually like really fascinating and fantastic, like at the same point in time. I now want to bring in Nurul, and like we had the great opportunity to work with MUIS, and it was a great learning experience for us. And that is why I think like it would be great for Nurul to share like her insights. Like she's an expert in understanding like the religious and ethical aspects of food technology, has like a high role in halal certification, at the same point in time halal compliance, the ethical considerations in food technology, and also consumer perspectives within the Muslim community. So I wanted to understand from Nurul or invite her to speak on this, that what's the MUIS approach like with regards to halal certification of cultivated meat, and what are the main challenges in this process? Because because MUIS announced it in January, and it took like a lot of like it fascinated people, but at the same point in time, it sparked a lot of interest. So I would love for Nurul to elaborate like a little bit on that. At the same point in time, speak a little bit around the main challenges in the process and the approach which MUIS has taken.
Thank you, Ankur, and a good afternoon for those of us who are in the Singapore and Asia region. So for MUIS, MUIS is the first regulatory Islamic authority to approve, not to approve, but to come to a position that cultivated meat products may be permissible for Muslims to consume on the basis that there are certain criteria to be met. So the main challenge that MUIS faces really is understanding the product itself, which I believe is a concept that other regulator, not necessarily Islamic regulator, are also grappling with, whether it should be treated as a conventional, traditional protein source, or whether we have to look at it from a different perspective. So that was the first challenge. And because of that, MUIS took some time. So Singapore Food Authority or Food Agency, SFA, approved it in December of 2020. But MUIS issued the fatwa in February of this year, 2024. So it took some time for us to deliberate on this particular matter. The main challenge really is to get the experts from the technical space and the experts from the religious space to come together to speak and to exchange their knowledge and expertise to come to the position that we have come to be. That's the first challenge that MUIS faced. The other one really is to get into, after the position has been, we have come to the position, it was important to ensure that the key opinion leaders and the community leaders, they understand why MUIS have come to that position. So the focus group engagements were very important in ensuring that the community at large in Singapore understands why MUIS came to that particular position. I think those are the main challenges, Ankur. If I may also add, in addition to just it being permissible to Muslim, I think generally, as a consumer, global consumers, there is a hurdle for the cellular agriculture industry to increase the awareness and acceptance of these products among the masses. Yeah. So that's right. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. Like if I may dig deeper, like do you is there like a timeline with regards to the guideline development, and then what would be like additional consideration for halal certification to start with? Like is there like a timeline which has already been published, or is in the works with regards to that? Okay, this is the timeline which we are going to work on to get the guidelines out. Is there some development on it? I'm really testing my luck here, by the way.
Okay, so as you know, Uncle, we in the work, the guidelines are in the work. I can share just the broad considerations that MUIS has in mind. So number one, the cells need to be from animals that are permissible for Muslims to consume. So animals the like of pork, meat from pork, or cells from pigs, animals that are not slaughtered in accordance with Islamic rites. These are considered as not acceptable sources of cells. Secondly, any processing aids, any additives that are used in the production of the cultivated meat product process, as well as the final product development process, will need to be halal. That means that there are no haram materials in it. So I believe the industry has moved away from fetal bovine serum, but in place, as a replacement for fetal bovine serum, the industry may be looking at growth serum that has to come from non-animal sources, and preferably it should be plant-based. So that is something that industry will need to consider as well, because there's a lot of additive that are currently being used in the media to encourage the growth and the growth of the cells. And thirdly, the product in Singapore, the product must first be approved by SFA. So SFA would be approval would be the prerequisite. and then the subsequent requirement that I just mentioned earlier would follow. In terms of when we would be publishing this set of guidelines, actually depends on the demand in the market, in the sense that at one point in time, there was a huge interest in Singapore from Singapore-based company for certification. But truthfully, the interest has quietened down a little. I'm not sure with the import of Vals meat from Australia into Singapore, it will start the interest again. But we actually are moving depending on the tone of the industry. So if there is a greater push and demand, we will put forth the requirements faster, so that the companies may submit halal application and we can process it as needed. Yeah.
Wow, that's actually really interesting. And like I know I need to go to two of my other panelists as well, but Nurul, if I may just ask you, and this was like really fascinating for me as well, and a great learning experience in terms of how MUIS has approached this entire halal issue, and the consideration which goes into it with regards to need, desires, and want. Like, can you actually touch upon it and elaborate a little bit for our audience today?
Do you mean the process of
Evaluation of cultivated meat to be halal?
So Singapore, I mean, and I think Australia and New Zealand would also have the benefit of having an actual manufacturing facility in the country. So we were lucky that we actually have a manufacturing facility based in Singapore. So the religious experts were brought to the manufacturing facility in Singapore to witness or to see how the process is like, for them to come to that particular conclusion. There was also the discussion of whether, as I mentioned earlier, that there is a need to change a mindset from looking at it as a meat source, and instead to view it as an alternative protein source. So that means that then if we see it from that point of view, it may be easier for consumers to accept, because when we say the word meat or chicken, there is already a preconceived notion of how meat and chicken should be. So the term we use here is actually alternative protein, and it's very clear in our communication to the community and our stakeholders that cultivated meat product are alternative sources of proteins, and it will be one day mainstream, and it is something that a consumer may choose. But MUIS, as a halal regulator, is not saying that you have to take it in place of your current meat sources. So I think we need to make that very clear. And so when we clarify that, I think generally consumers and our community are more accepting. So it does not seem as if we are telling them that you have to eat it now. It's just, it's there one day if we need to fall back to getting proteins from other sources.
Sure. No, really, thank you so much. That's really interesting. I want to now go to Yeonjoo, because like we were talking about the approach of sometimes regulatory agencies. I want to understand more about the South Korean approach, like from MFDS. Like, what's their approach in terms of ensuring the safety of cultivated meat products? Is there a certain like timeline which you know of with regards to approval in South Korea? Like, would really love your insights on that front.
So, in terms of timeline for the evaluation, the MFDS has set 270 working days for the review of an application. This is about 14 months. And since it's known that one company have submitted their applications earlier this year, I expect we will see the first approval in early 2025.
Oh, wow. And is there like a certain kind of approach which like South Korea takes with regards to safety assessment?
Yeah, so the MFDA's request an extensive list of data from the cradle to the grave of the cell-based food, and the data required. I could give you a laundry list: cell donor, cell lines, development history, domestic and overseas approval and permission status, usage in Korea and other countries, specific manufacturing method, purpose, name, specification, and amount of use for the substances used during the manufacturing processes, characterization of raw materials, appearance, component analysis, hazardous substances, safety data regarding the basis of intake, materials used, allergens, genetic stability, toxicity test data through animal testing, which include 90-day toxicity testing and genetic toxicity testing, data regarding the product and consumption. And when conducting analysis, the ministry requires companies to comply with publicly authorized method, either domestically or internationally, such as Codex Alimentarius Commission or Association of Official Agricultural Chemists, AOAC. And toxicity testing has to be conducted at a GLP facility and follow OECD test guidelines. And supporting documents have to be reported either from governments or international organizations or journal papers published in SCIE or Korea Citation Index journals.
Oh, that's actually really interesting. Now I want to go to Victoria because we talked about regulatory hurdles and challenges before, especially in the context of Australia. So what are the major regulatory challenges like which you foresee, and like if you want to delve deeper into like how like the Cellular Agriculture Australia is trying to address them, and what's the strategy or the game plan there with regards to the hurdles and the challenges which exist?
Yeah, thanks, Ankur. Can I ask you, Yeonjoo, do you have to apply? Do you have to pay
Yeah.
to submit an application to your regulator?
Yeah, there's a fee, service fee.
Yeah, roughly, do you know how much? Are you prepared to share roughly how much that is, or does the regulator advertise that?
It is actually mentioned in the application form. I have to.
That's okay.
So
That's fine.
It's about $32,000 US.
32,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in Australia, to submit a novel food application, which is what covers cultivated meat, that's classed as a major procedure for FSANZ. And so the application fee is about 200,000 Australian dollars. So we see that as a major barrier to innovation and commercialisation in this country, because most of the cultivated meat companies are startups. Some may be at scale, but really only at scale to undertake the required testing. It's fascinating to hear that list out of South Korea. Thank you for sharing that. That's intense. I think Australia's is similar, but I've yet to get formal advice from FSANZ or formal guidance from them as to what they require versus what VAL willingly submitted to make their case. So we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. We don't have guidance, which is another potential barrier as well. Companies not quite understanding what they need to submit in their dossiers. We have, as I mentioned, it's a slower process in Australia. Singapore took just over a year. VAL is still undergoing assessment in Australia, and that approval will need to be signed off through government processes as well. So what do we do about it at CellAg Australia? Obviously, whenever we get the opportunity, we speak to that barrier to innovation. Obviously, VAL's application that came out for consultation at the end of last year did attract a lot of attention from Northern Hemisphere cultivated meat companies who did call to ask about how to apply to FSANZ, and every single one of them was put off by the price and the length of time that it may take. Australia, just as a market itself, is probably not the first market you would pick for a cultivated meat product, because we have such high quality and affordable red meat in Australia through our conventional industries. So when those Northern Hemisphere companies do the maths, they have suggested to me the economics don't stack up. So that's an opportunity lost for Australia in terms of consumer choice, but also for the opportunity of those companies perhaps entering our market or even manufacturing here would help grow the ecosystem. So we talk to FSANZ quite a bit about that. We also have an industry working group on regulation that really drills down into what some of those barriers might be from a technical perspective. And to be honest, the science and the technology and the safety are not regulatory hurdles here. I think FSANZ is well equipped to do those assessments, and that's not really the case for us. So it is around the cost and the time are our hurdles. Will that speed up as FSANZ assesses more and more applications? You might expect so. Are we hoping that our products will be considered no longer novel foods and just assessed on a food safety basis? We hope so, but it's not going to happen overnight.
No, sure, absolutely, and I completely agree on that part, that like it would definitely take like some time to get used to all of this. Just taking like one of the questions from the Q&A box, which is from Olivia for Victoria, which is that in the Australian regulatory process, why are there two consultations, and how long will the second one take, and what happens after the second consultation to start with?
So there's two consultations because the assessment or the application is considered a major procedure. So it needs additional technical consideration, and it needs to go out for public consultation. That's just how we do things. That's what the Act says. We need to publicly consult. So the first round of consultation was seeking feedback on the hazard and risk assessment. The second consultation, my understanding is, which should open soon-ish, will ask us as a sector to consider the proposed draft amendments to our food standards code that will allow approval of Vals product. And it will also have some commentary on our World Trade Organization obligations, some more commentary on labelling and naming of these products. And then a recommendation will be made by FSANZ to the food ministers, who then approve or request a review of the approval or the recommendation. So when I ask FSANZ why it takes so long, or why we need two processes, that second consultation we assume will be open for 6 weeks-ish. Sorry, Olivia, that was your question. When I ask why the process takes so long, FSANZ come back and say, well, we take food safety very seriously in Australia, and so we don't rush product to market, which I can completely understand. But at the same time, I think that's a bit disrespectful to Singapore, because I'm sure Singapore also take food safety very seriously. And they were managing to get these approvals done in a shorter time frame. So it's just the process that we have. But over time, hopefully that will get more efficient.
There's one more question, Victoria, like from the Q&A box itself, which is there any information on justification of the 200K cost, and what is the money used for? Like, what's the included expected cost of the safety testing as well? Like, does this include it, or does it exclude it? Like, if you have any thoughts on costs, like, would love to know.
Yeah, so that is, so in Australia, a lot of our government services are not full fee, but fee recovery, cost recovery. So there is an expectation that the applicant will make an application that it is outlined, the fees are outlined in the application handbook, which is on the FSANZ website. So they're quite transparent about it, and it's linked to the number of hours that they believe will be required to undertake the assessment. It does not include the company costs of testing or any of the other data that you would have to submit as part of your application. It is purely the cost of FSANZ doing that assessment. Now, with that cost comes a statutory timeline. So FSANZ is required to meet a standard of assessment a timetable, which we understand is not necessarily applicable in Northern Hemisphere regulatory approvals. So there is a potential benefit to paying that fee, and that you get that statutory timeline. That has obviously blown out with Vals application being the first one. So I don't know what Val paid. Obviously, that's commercial in confidence to them, what they paid for their testing, but they would have had to have paid around $200,000 for that application, is my assumption based on the handbook.
Oh, wow. Well, big money right there. Now I want to really go to Nurul, because there were like a few questions which were there in the chat box. So first was from Sharifa Ahmed, that who will need to provide halal status for the overseas cultivated meat manufacturers, since VAW got its regulatory approval in Singapore. It seems like a very valid question, but also like a very concurrent question.
Thanks, Ankur. So the first question is on whether there's wiggle room, right? For the processing aids that may potentially use haram materials. So this is actually, so we take reference from the existing way that any certification body would assess a halal application file. So at present, for example, if you have monosodium glutamate, MSG, that you use into the product, we would typically require that to either have a halal certificate, or for it to, for the company to fill up a questionnaire to indicate that there hasn't been any haram material use in that processing aid. So there are actually two parts to the certification process. So you would note that first, the company that cultivate the cell mass would apply for certification. That's one. After that, that cell mass, if it's not done in the same facility, would have to go to another manufacturing facility for the final product to be formed. So that cell mass will need to be certified, and then that final product will also need to be certified. So the challenge would really be on the first, if I may use the term first touch point, which is the manufacturing facility for the cell mass. So yes, we would need to ensure that the immediate growth factors or the immediate serum that are added to grow the cells do not contain anything of porcine origin, for example, or it is something that comes from bovine origin, then that cow or that bovine source should be slaughtered in the Islamic manner. And this is something that we have also mentioned in our engagement with the industry stakeholders in Singapore. So they acknowledge that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done in order to bring the cellular industry players to the level of where it is for food, for conventional food. Because for conventional food, we already have a halal ecosystem where food additive would have a halal cert. So we don't need to dig deeper. So the same would need to be done for the cellular agriculture industry, and that would take time. But for sure, anything that comes from blood or anything that comes from animal, from MUIS's perspective, it has to come from slaughtered animal. So I hope that clarifies the first question that one of the anonymous attendee has.
No, sure. There's also like a second question, which is that if the products are manufactured overseas, will provide the halal status?
Yeah. So, so MUIS do not go overseas to conduct halal certification audit. It has to be the certification body that's based in that country that does the checks, because we wouldn't be able to frequently go to that other country to do a check. For Singapore, we can quickly do our unannounced inspection, and we know that the company is continuously complying with our requirements. So we can work with a certification body in that particular country, but they would need to approach us formally so that we can sort of like do a knowledge exchange. We know that if one of the countries that probably would be among the first who may reach out to us would be the certification bodies in Australia and New Zealand, because I think in all likelihood that FIANS could be approving the product soon. So perhaps there are some companies that wish to export certified products to Singapore. So yes, certification body in Australia may approach MUIS, and so we can share with them our thinking. And this is important because most of the cells would need to come from live animals, and most of such live animals usually are from Australia, Brazil, and New Zealand. So yes, important that we get that first step right.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. No, that's actually like really good question. Now I want to go to Yeonjoo, who also got like a couple of really interesting questions. One is, what is a 90 days toxicity study? Is that a study done on animals? And like if I may include like the second question, which is from Jason, that can the safety data submitted to Korean regulatory authorities be shared with regulators in other countries as well?
Yeah, so in terms of 90-day toxicity study, it's a test conducted on animals. So under the test animals, usually mouse, will be fed the food under examination for 90 days. And during and after the 90 days, the animal's health conditions will be evaluated, such as blood collection and tissue examination and things like that. So we will see whether there's any toxicity in the animals during the feeding period. And in terms of the dossiers sharing between the regulators, I don't think it will be automatically shared with the regulators in other countries. And whether it will be open for public is not certain. The ministry has not officially made any mentions about it.
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. Like that's actually really interesting.
Can I jump in, Ankur? Is that okay? Just on the sharing of the data. One of the things that CellAg Australia and other partners is trying to achieve in Australia is some harmonisation of regulatory approvals, particularly across APAC. And I know that we're working with GFI APAC and APAC SCA on trying to harmonise those so that we can have a system where we can accept overseas assessments and vice versa, particularly on some of the culture media, basal media, some of the really simple, non-technical type ingredients that have been approved overseas. So while that also, I spend a lot of time writing letters to FSANZ. That also, we're waiting for some feedback on that. But that's ultimately the game, the end game, that if you submit a dossier in South Korea and that gets approved, you can submit optimally. We'd love to see you be able to submit something shorter because Australia and New Zealand will have its own rules, and that's understandable. Each jurisdiction will have its own requirements. But if there's the opportunity to have a single dossier just with some extra explanatory information that's relevant to each jurisdiction, rather than starting from scratch for each jurisdiction, that's the end goal for us.
No, sure. That's also quite interesting. Nurul, there are like a few questions which are coming in the Q&A box for you. First is with regards to how about cells picked in a fertilized egg, and like if there is no Islamic mannering for slaughtering the egg embryo, is that a problem to get the halal certification? And the second question, which you can club both of the question, is around cultivated seafood. So how does MUIS view cultivated seafood, and if there are like any processes or any evaluation criteria which is being under the works with regards to cultivated seafood as well?
Thanks, Ankur. So on the first question, if the cells are from egg or from embryos, the process is slightly more straightforward, but there's also a question of how the cell from the egg and the embryo were extracted. After extraction, were these placed in fetal bovine serum? If yes, then potentially that might be a challenge, because as earlier shared, the use of fetal bovine serum is not accepted. So there should be a different way or a different technique of preserving the cells and then, continue to grow the cells to get your other cells in the future. So I hope that answered the first question. So it is possible if there isn't any use of fetal bovine serum, and that we know what aids and where it comes from. Because I think there are some established cell line that comes from embryo, but the embryo is, they don't necessarily know where the embryo is from, because it was many, many years ago. So the challenge to the industry is to make sure that whatever that you wish to apply for certification, the line needs to be established first, and it should come from halal sources. So I hope I answered the first question. The second question is cultivated seafood. From a theory perspective, yes, seafood should be a bit more straightforward because there's no slaughtering involved, and generally all seafood are considered as halal for Muslims to consume. But again, the other growth serum and all the other additives that are added to grow the seafood or the particular seafood product would be the one that we'll be looking into deeply. So yes, you have checkmarked the first criteria of possibly the cells are from halal sources. Now the challenge is for you to meet the other second criteria, the second criteria essentially, which is to ensure that all the processing aids, all the cell additive, the medium that are being used are indeed halal. Because the third point, of course, if SFA has approved it, then technically there's nothing that you need to be worried about. So I hope that answered that question.
No, sure. So, I want to bring in another question, which is in the Q&A box as well, which is around where the anonymous attendee has asked that they had a question following your comment on FBS or other reagents or additives which might be considered haram. So as you can imagine, cultured meat manufacturers might have large and complex supply chains, and there's a chance that one of these suppliers might have used some of these haram components at some stage of their own process. Would this presence alone prohibit halal certification for the eventual cultured meat product? Or is there wiggle room here in which halal certification might still be possible if a manufacturer can demonstrate a lack of residues from the haram component in the final product?
Okay, so there shouldn't be any the starting material or the materials that added to the food cannot contain any thing that's haram. So I think that's clear. So even if you are to use and because this is food, so it's different for drugs. So if you have to use an enzyme and the enzyme comes is of porcine origin, for example, so you use it and you use it to produce your substrate, and then you add it into the growth serum, for example. So we would not be allowing that because there is the use of enzyme of porcine origin. Again, because this is food. So if it's drugs, the consideration are different. Because drugs is something that you need to cure something, right? But food is for nourishment. So ideally, you should really be using materials that are either naturally, should be items that are naturally halal and shouldn't contain anything that's haram. So I hope that answers the person's question. Things may change perhaps down the road, but this is a current thinking at present based on the guidance that we have received from the Fatwa Committee and the Office of the Mufti.
No, sure, absolutely. That's quite interesting to know. I want to go to Victoria now and talk a little bit about the consumer perception in Australia. How do you see it evolving? What's if you want to call this section like the what's next section, like what's next for Australia, New Zealand, and where do you see a few of the things going?
Yeah, so we don't in Australia, New Zealand have great independent consumer research. We have two cultivated meat companies in Australia, Val and Magic Valley, and I'm sure they're doing market research. But as a sector, we just haven't had the resources to do a deep consumer or market attitudes to sell ag or cultivated meat. I know for SANS have been doing a little bit of work in that space as part of the Val assessment. I guess I can just make some assumptions that the awareness would be very low in Australia, again, because we have fantastic conventional incumbent meat industries, and so it's possibly a novelty, and that's where Val's strategy of doing new types of food is probably the right one for an Australian market. It's not something that's competing with an existing product in restaurants. So that is a bit of a knowledge gap for us. That said, CellAg Australia is funding some university students to undertake some research at the PhD and master's level to consider some of those barriers and opportunities, but we don't have wide market research access. What's next? I guess let's hope that the VAL application in Australia and New Zealand is approved. And then let's hope that this year that we can get another assessment underway or in progress, so that we can see another company with a different product to Vals going through the process, which would be really exciting. And can I just do a plug? If you are a company online today, and I hope I haven't put you off applying for approval in Australia, New Zealand, but if you are interested, CellAg Australia has developed a suite. I've just shared the link there. We have developed a suite of resources for companies interested in seeking approval here. It does include draft dossiers, which you can speak to us about the price of accessing those. So we've done, half of the work for you in that sense. So we'd obviously welcome any APAC or otherwise based company in talking to us about how to navigate our regulatory system.
No, sure, absolutely. And if I may now go to Yeonjoo and ask what's next? What's next for South Korea? What's next for the regulatory development there? What's next for maybe the consumers there? If you wanna go about and elaborate that.
Should I go first? So
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of next steps for the cultivated meat industry in South Korea, I expect some more companies will submit their applications to the MFDAs this year, because some companies have started their research since 2019. So it's been about 5-6 years since they are in development, and some of them are ready for tastings and product manufacturing. So I see a few more companies coming out in the market, maybe in 1 or 2 years. And another thing is also consumer education. I would say it is still a very unfamiliar concept to many Koreans, but there are a couple of consumer studies around cultivated meat in South Korea. So I have brought some data. One survey conducted by APAC Society for Cellular Agriculture with 1,100 respondents in 2023 revealed that 90% of respondents were willing to try cultivated meat or seafood, and 19% answered they would prefer cultivated meat over plant-based meat, and 39% voted in favor of selling in supermarkets and restaurants, 50% were neutral, and 10% were negative. Another survey conducted by a professor in Sookmyung Women's University in the same year with 1,000 respondents shows quite a different pictures. About 36% of the respondents were aware of cell-based food, and 30% said they could eat cell-based food without concern. So we still need more consumer research in terms of consumer awareness and consumer acceptance. Interestingly, there's a new TV show featuring cultivated meat on Disney Plus. It is called Blood Free. If you if you use Disney Plus, please look out for it. It's a thriller drama about successful cultivated meat company CEO. And since cultivated meat is still a very new concept for many consumers in South Korea, I'm very curious and excited about how much this show will increase public awareness of this industry. and we will try to make good use of this opportunity to improve consumer acceptance of this novel food in a positive direction.
No, and I'm pretty sure there are two people I could be really happy with the plugin of the APAC SCA report, that is Kalisa and Peter. So that's really good. I think like now I want to go to Nurul as well and ask like this question of like what's next? Like what's next for Singapore? What's next like for MUIS? Where do you see few things evolving like in 2024, in 2025? And like what's next for MUIS now?
Thanks, Ankur. So I'm glad that there is a show that's not scientific on Disney Plus. I think that would help consumer understand a bit more about cultivated meat. So for MUIS, I think it depends on, because halal certification is not a mandatory process. It's actually voluntary. And the interesting portion is that there are more countries that are already putting in place a regulatory framework to assess novel foods such as cultivated meat. So I believe the countries in the region would and may take reference from MUIS's position and develop their own independent assessment. So I think there are exciting times ahead for companies who are in the cellular space. But I think that is speaking too much in the future. I think to address the present concern, number one, consumer must be willing to accept the product. And I mean, I'm putting it out there to the industry players who are here today, whether there is a need to even change the term cultivated meat, whether it is something that should be called something else, because earlier, as I mentioned, when we say meat, we already have a preconceived notion of what meat should be. So that is a challenge for the industry, and whether we want to place it as something that's just a form of proteins and it's not meat. So something for all of us to consider. That's one. And the other is the work is actually cut out for the industry. For those who wish to apply for certification, I personally do not think that you can start with what we have now, because you probably would not have met the criteria that I have just shared with you. So it's important that if you wish to go for certification, depending on where you are, if you're in Singapore, then you engage with MUIS. And if you are in other parts of the world, then you engage with the Islamic regulator in your country, so that you get it right the first time, instead of investing so much. And then at the end of the day, when you do the submission to the certification body, you find out that, hey, the cells are not traceable, so you can't meet a very important criteria. So that's my view, Ankur. And one last one, and this is my own personal view. We all know that the demand for meat and poultry has increased because of us, because we are consuming more, because it's associated with affluence. So I think it's on all of us to change the way we eat, that maybe we can start being mindful consumers. We start by our own, so we reduce the amount of meat, we reduce the amount of poultry that we consume, so that hopefully, we can, that's the true change, right? So when there is reduced demand, then the industry will not be producing so much, and there wouldn't be deforestation and so on and so forth. So something for us to think about. Yeah. Thanks, Uncle.
Oh, sure, absolutely, and completely agree with the points there. Just in the last section, and I know that like we have like approximately like just 4 minutes I would just like to take like 1 minute each like from all of us, and I want like to start with Victoria first and go into this, that if there is one opportunity which companies or organizations, like even government organizations, should pursue in this area, what it should be.
Did you say one opportunity? Sorry, you just broke up a little bit.
Yes,
One opportunity.
Like,
Oh, I would love to see particularly in APAC, our regulators come together and determine a single way to assess and regulate these products, so that we can get product to market across the region quickly, and then let consumers decide if it is something that they would like to include in their diet. Until then, I fear it's going to be quite a piecemeal approach in jurisdictions, and I'd love to see some harmonisation across the region.
Sure. If I may now go to Yeonjoo and ask, like, what do you see like as one opportunity like which can be pursued by companies or even government organizations, that hey, this is a policy priority or an opportunity for you to go about, grab and make a difference? What would it be?
I think I say the industry, government, and academia cooperation will be pivotal. Because cultivated meat is still a very nascent market. We don't have any product out yet, so many consumers are curious and anxious about the safety about this novel product. So companies can just show what they how safe their product are, but we need also support from the government bodies and the academia. So we are quite fortunate that there are many academics in the prestigious and national universities in the field of animal science, food science, and biotechnology who have developed interest in the cultivated meat and expanded their research area to cultivated meat, and they have served a role in delivering scientific comments to the government and serving on advisory committees. So their role has been quite significant, and also their neutral perspective on the safety and the nutritional aspects of cultivated meat will be very important when communicating with consumers. So the industry players have to build good relationship with the academia and the government bodies, not only the MFDAs, but also the Ministry of Agriculture. So we need to have a collaborative efforts to make this industry actually on the track.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's actually like a really fantastic insight. Nurul, if I may go to you, what would be like one opportunity, like which is just around the corner for organizations, companies, governments, MUIS, or even individuals to pursue?
Okay, so I think Victoria mentioned about harmonization, and Yeonjoo mentioned about how there must be collaboration between the academia and the regulator. So for and halal, because it's the demand for halal certified product is increasing. So I'll just comment specific to halal. I think there needs to be a bridge between the Islamic scholars and the technical experts, and the technical experts will be both the academia and the regulator. So they need to come together so that other countries can come to a position, because right now only MUIS has come to a position on cultivated meat, and so I'm just putting it out there that I'd be more than happy to work with another country's regulatory authority specific to Islamic religious matters, so that we can share what we know, and if need be, we can organize, if there's a need to organize a visit, and if it's possible, we would be more than happy to help them visit our facilities. I mean the facilities in Singapore.
That's really great, and thank you so much for saying that. Now I think like we are almost coming to an end of like our webinar time. So I would like to thank Victoria, Nurul, and Yeonjoo for the great contribution. I think there is plenty of takeaways like from this webinar, and we do look optimistic with the prospect of cultivated meat shining bright in our region, and like probably also like a South Korean drama show may be like a good way to go about with the consumer education and getting people on board with things. In the 1970s and the 80s, it was the American films or the movies which popularized the idea of computers, and that led to wide adoption of personal computers over a period of time. we can see similar movements happening in other sectors as well, and that might be the case for cultivated meat, who knows. But there are a lot of regulatory hurdles and difficulties which exist in our way, from coordination to policy loopholes, but at the same point in time, the black boxes which needs to be uncovered to get to a point where we can make cultivated meat a reality, and we can get to a world where alternative proteins are not alternative anymore. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and thank you to all my panelists today.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.